Now, in 1911, the most famous painting in the world, the Mona Lisa, was stolen from the Louvre in Paris by a museum worker who hid it in his apartment for 2 years. Well, on October the 19th this year, the same museum was the victim of literal daylight robbery. Thieves broke in using a mechanical lift and a disc cutter for an old-fashioned smash and grab. Scooters were waiting to rush them from the scene, and the world wondered how such a high-profile location could be infiltrated with such low-tech tools. And it's not just world-famous museums that are the target of casual theft. Mobile phone thefts are soaring on the streets of London and other major cities, part of global organised crime gangs that ship those devices halfway around the world. Many of them end up in China. And shoplifting that may seem a casual theft is one of the big costs to retailers. It's a problem that's getting worse and more dangerous. In the United States, shoplifting soared by more than 90% between 2019 and 2023. Here in the UK, losses from theft have grown to more than £2 billion. That's around $3 billion, with violent incidents now up 50%. But that audacious break-in at the Louvre begs the question. Just how do criminals sell stolen goods, especially such high-profile ones? Well, my first guest is a leading expert in recovering stolen, looted and missing works of art. Christopher Marinello, welcome to Talking Business, and give me your assessment of what happened at the Louvre. How unusual was it in terms of how it was done and the relatively low-tech nature of this heist?
Europe has seen a plague of museum thefts all over the world, and it's been a problem. But to take on a museum of the magnitude and importance of the Louvre was really the criminals' way of sending a message that they did not fear law enforcement in Europe and they do not fear museum security.
Yes, and that in itself is interesting too. It was audacious. It was a literal daylight robbery, wasn't it? It was done in plain sight of people who were there. You know, what does it tell us as well about the methods that were used? They were very confident that this would work, weren't they?
That's right. You know, also in Europe, we've seen a trend away from more traditional art thefts, paintings, sculptures, Picasso, things like that, things that they have to keep intact. We've been seeing more smash and grab type heists like this one. Now, granted, with all the tools that they had and what they brought and the forklift that they used, essentially it was a glorified smash and grab.
And to your point, the reason that they stole the jewels is one assumes they will then break those up and sell them separately and therefore untraceable and unrecoverable.
There's two things that lead us to believe that. Is number one, they want to hide the evidence of their crime. So by breaking up the stones, they do just that. Number two, they want to monetize these objects as quickly as possible. That's what makes a successful heist, is being able to get the money out of it. And to do that, they've got to break them up and sell them as stones that cannot be traced to the Louvre.
And so many people will be surprised at how seemingly easy it was to get something that is so valuable and so precious, particularly for the French. Are museums taking security seriously enough, do you think?
Well, museums are a bit behind the eight ball, so to speak. The funding has been cut for them throughout Europe. Europe has been spending money coming out of COVID, the immigration crisis, and now the war in Ukraine. And the first to get cut are the arts, and that means museum security.
And so for the Louvre, deeply embarrassing. The question, I guess, is what they will now change.
Well, it's unfortunate that we look at change after the fact and that we don't consider staying on top of museum security in advance of these types of thefts. But there's going to be a lot of introspection, a lot of changes that are going to take place, not just for this museum, but this was a wake-up call for every museum, because if they can hit a museum of the magnitude of the Louvre, they can get anywhere.
And so for something like jewels that, as we've discussed, maybe get broken up and sold and therefore will disappear, what about things like famous paintings or sculptures? Surely the market for those is so limited, and of something of, you know, such global recognition. where does that end up? Is it just hung on someone's wall and no one will ever see it again?
In the old days, you could steal a painting from England and sell it in the United States, and nobody really know. But since the internet, all these auction houses and dealers are putting their items for sale online. So everybody, and plus the media is all over these art theft cases, so everybody knows what's been stolen. So that kind of takes the ability away from criminals to monetize their theft when they steal paintings or sculptures. But that's not the case with gold and jewelry like this. They can quickly break these stones down into smaller pieces and sell them in the marketplace without anyone knowing that they came from the Louvre. This is the type of theft we're seeing more of these days, and this is the type of theft we need to prevent.
And so is there any possibility that these jewels will be recovered? And what will the authorities be looking at? What is the process that they will go through now to try, at least, to recover some of them?
The first 24 and 48 hours are critical, but that has passed. We're now talking weeks. And with every passing day, with every passing week, the chances of recovering these jewels intact is lower. And always, it has been that to recover these jewels, you would have to capture the criminals. These are not going to be put in the marketplace for anyone to spot. They're not going to be offered for auction. Everyone knows about them. They are untouchable at this point, but not as broken down gems.
How has the market for stolen goods, particularly these sorts of goods, changed in the time that you've been working in the field?
We've seen a pattern of more thefts of jewelry, of stones, of gold that could be melted down and quickly entered into the marketplace without any trace. We're also seeing thefts becoming more violent, more weapons being used, more sledgehammers, more breaking. The idea for criminals is to get in and out as quickly as possible, so they're not really affected by the security measures that are in place. We're also seeing a bit of a lax enforcement from the police and from governments. And it's not their fault. It's because there's not enough money going into museum security, not enough money going to law enforcement, and prosecutors are not charging people with crimes and giving them enough jail crime.
Christopher Marinello, really good to talk to you on the programme this week. Thanks for being with us.
It's my pleasure.
Now, it's not just the rarefied world of fine art and jewels where heists can happen. On the streets of our cities and in our shops, theft and crime seems to be on the rise, despite new technology that promises to help catch criminals. My next guest from the University of London has been tracking what's behind the increase. Emmeline Taylor, welcome to Talking Business. Now, we tend to think of this as a London problem. We see all those images of phones being snatched on the streets of London. It's not just a UK problem, is it? But, you know, what is behind this rise in theft, of this sort of personal theft?
Theft from the person is increasing across London and across the UK more broadly, and there's particular items that are desirable to criminals: mobile phones, luxury watches, jewellery, handbags, etc. London has really become known, unfortunately, as the mobile phone theft capital of the world, and there's good reason for that. This crime has more than tripled in the last 4 years, so over 80,000 handsets are thought to have been stolen across the capital in the last year. So it's a really significant and growing problem. There's several factors that have coalesced to really result in this growing crime, not least the demand from international markets where these handsets can achieve thousands of dollars in resale price, either by using the handset or breaking it up into the component parts. This makes it really attractive to the lower level criminals as well, who are being remunerated perhaps £200–300 per handset. And it's a very simple crime to execute. There's no shortage of victims, particularly in tourist locations and hotspots. And armed with, the ability to ride mopeds or e-bikes, these individuals can get away really quickly, often before the victim has even realised actually what's happened.
So talk me through that process, the logistics that go into this. From the phone being snatched on a pavement, it can end up on the other side of the world, can't it?
Yeah, and so there was a Metropolitan Police investigation, and this really came about through serendipity. A victim of phone theft managed to trace her phone to a warehouse near Heathrow Airport, When the police investigated, they found it alongside almost 1,000 other handsets that were destined for Hong Kong. The police realised that they were onto something with this particular find, and they decided to investigate this in a way that they would other serious organised acquisitive crimes. They were able to then find the people at the top of this criminal network pyramid. And once they arrested those, they realised that they'd actually dismantled an organised criminal network that they think were responsible for stealing more than 40,000 handsets out of the hands of people that were visiting London.
So it gets pinched off the streets of London. Then talk me through that process.
So China is one of the largest trading hubs for refurbished phones, stolen phones, or even Frankenstein phones, which are comprised of component parts taken from dismantled handsets. And there's several reasons why there's such a high demand in China. And one of them is that there's a desire for handsets that might not be readily available through legitimate means within that country. But crucially, some Chinese network providers do not subscribe to the international blacklist, which means that mobile phones that are known to have been stolen are no longer able to be operated. Now, this means that some of those phones can be unlocked, they can be readily used within that market. And it means the person in China who has that handset, it won't also be used to block certain sites that we know some Chinese network providers are obliged to block on behalf of the Chinese government. So this makes these handsets particularly valuable within that market, so much so that they will attract a higher price as a stolen second-hand device than they would in the UK market. So that's where we're seeing these quite sophisticated organised crime networks begin to realise that mobile phone theft is more lucrative than perhaps drugs markets or weapons markets. And that's why they're turning their eye to this particular modus operandi.
Is there a feeling that the tech firms themselves should be doing more here as well? Should they be doing more to make these phones unusable if they are stolen?
This is one that has been kicked around in terms of, do we need to legislate? Should the industry do more to protect these devices? There is a question, I think, for those providers of mobile phones to think about how can they educate their customers to protect themselves. Because sometimes when a phone is stolen, it's not just the device that is then turned into hard cash for the criminals. There's also then ongoing frauds, accessing personal data to then be able to commit further offences. That's where I think the mobile phone network providers and the manufacturers do play a role to be able to have that kill switch to prevent those further ongoing offences to be committed when somebody unfortunately falls victim to this crime.
Now, of course, it's not just phone theft that we're talking about here, because we've seen retailers take, some actions, maybe locking more stuff behind a counter or, putting more stuff in safety boxes. There's also a conflict, isn't there, from a retailer's point of view, because on one hand, they want everything out on display. They want it to be, a big choice for customers to come in and hopefully buy more. But at the same time, you've got the security department saying, no, we want to lock more behind counters and, behind doors to make sure that it's not pinched. I wonder who wins in all of this.
There sometimes can be internal conversations between departments such as marketing that wants everything to be so accessible and look so fantastic and you can touch and feel all of the products. And then the security function that, as you say, might rather things were locked away behind cabinets. Now, fast forward a couple of years since the beginning of this increase in acquisitive crime, and I think we're now seeing a more sophisticated response to how you can manage criminal behaviours using types of psychology combined with technology to make it harder for them to actually access products. What we're also seeing is the increasing use of artificial intelligence, as we are across most sectors, and the ability to use AI and overlay it over things like CCTV and facial recognition is providing this really clear way of detecting offenders. So using behavioural analytics, people who are suspicious tend to act slightly differently to people with honest intentions. And of course, then being able to detect an individual after the event, even if they've left the retail store, and understand if they're offending in multiple stores across multiple locations. So I think joining the dots is starting to become much cleverer, and retailers are much more sophisticated now in how they identify offenders.
Emmeline Taylor, really good to have you on the programme this week. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.